Have you ever heard the statement, "I wouldn't miss it for the world"? Anybody ever heard that? Give me something. What is it that you would put on this statement? Or you can say, you can afterwards, you could have said something like, I wouldn't have missed it for the world, but give me something that would fit this category in your life. Super Bowl, okay? Watching a Super Bowl. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Give me another one. Concert, what do you say? Weddings, okay? Concert. Any other ones that come up? Being with your family? Okay, being with your family. Wouldn't miss it for the world. That's a good one. Yeah. High school graduation, sure, right? That's a good one, right? Soccer game, what's that? Grandkids' birthdays. Yeah, that's a good one. Grandkids in the room. Does she give good presents? Okay, we're not sure on that one yet. So as I thought about this past week, a couple different things came to my mind. Number one was my wedding, right? You're not going to miss that. I wouldn't miss it for the world. And, right, you'd have to be dragging me to get there. Now, I'm the person that really, it does take a lot to miss something. Even back last April when I had COVID, people say, well, you missed that Sunday. I said, it's not because I wouldn't have been here. It's just not socially acceptable. I would have been here still. It takes an awful lot for me not to be somewhere. This is the way I'm wired. And so this statement, for me, is a lot of things that I do. But I thought about it this way. A couple years ago, my brother Zach and I went to a Duke game, and I wouldn't have missed that for anything. I'm a huge Duke fan. This is a picture I took from, where we were sitting, and I wouldn't miss it for anything. You'd have to take a lot to make me miss that. And then I also think about Friday night football games. I mean, if I had to miss a game, there's nothing like missing a game. So if you're not aware, I coach at the high school here. And it would take a lot. It would have to take something absolutely, crazy, like a once-in-a-lifetime type thing, to have to miss something like that. But what about this? What about being together with the church on a Sunday morning? Would you say something the same? Would you compare it to the wedding or the graduation or the concert or being with family? Does it fit that same category? Because we talk about this idea of joining on Sunday, and we can often see it as a very transactional statement, like, hey, just get here. And that's why I preface this with the Sunday rhythms are one of the ways we live this out. And so we're not just asking you to come and sit in a seat here. We're asking you to be a part of whatever the day has for us. And so that could be coming in here and worshiping and being together, or going downstairs for coffee, or it's joining the serve or staying for a meal. And it's not meant just to check off boxes in the life of the church, but it's meant to help us live out the commands of Christ that we see. And so we can see Join on Sunday as a checklist, but it's meant to spring us into the rest of the Christian faith. And as we see, we go from join on Sunday to join a group that the Christian life is lived in community. But obviously, we need markers or symbols in our life to give us some landmarks of how to live our faith out. And we're going to see this morning from the book of Hebrews how the writer of Hebrews is going to share to us his importance of meeting together as a body of believers. And we're going to see what he writes to the Christians he's writing to. And so if you have a Bible, you can turn me to Hebrews chapter 10, beginning in verse 23. So as we get up to this point in Hebrews 10, verse 23, before that he talks about the thing that Jesus has done of giving us access right into the presence of God. He paid the sacrifice, and one of the great themes of Hebrews is that Jesus is greater. We don't need to keep on going back to the systems of sacrifice for our salvation. And not only did Jesus purchase our salvation, but he gave us direct access into the presence of God, and we can go to God himself as his people. And so he's writing now based on this idea, and he says here in verse 23, let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Again, here's a verse that can't be done in isolation. Here's a verse that can't be done on your own. And then he goes on and says this, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Often when we see this verse, we often take it a little bit out of context and we don't put the fullness of it into it. So here's the stage a little bit more. In this time and place that he's writing to, these Christians are being persecuted for their faith. And so he's telling them, even though you're being persecuted for your faith, don't stop getting together. Right? And so we can be with the church not just on Sunday morning. Right? We have different groups that meet here that's about being with the church, but the join on Sunday is that marker for us that we say we need to have these rhythms in our life of these things. And so he's talking to them and saying, you know what? Even though you might be on your way to church and maybe you're going to be persecuted on the way, right? Maybe there's going to be some roadblocks on your way there. Don't stop. Even though someone's going to be after you for your faith, don't stop getting together. Now imagine that. Imagine someone's waiting for you to accuse you of being to gathering in the life of the church, taking your life possibly, and he's telling them, don't stop doing it. Don't stop doing that. Now, we live in a time and a place where that might not happen as often or maybe much, but there are external circumstances in our life that keep us from gathering together with the body of believers. What are some external circumstances that keep us from gathering with the church? Illness, snow, yep. It's great. I mean, I'm surprised. The turnout here is tremendous for when the snow hit and how it hit. For some of you, it just was too late and you couldn't turn back. So, what are some other external circumstances? What's that? Did that happen to you this morning? Pat had a non-functioning vehicle halfway here. It's a good one. What'd you say, Tiffany? Birthdays? Okay, maybe your birthday keeps you away. What are some other ones? Kids' sports, great one. Hired from the week, right? Yeah. Right? And then sometimes there's those things that pop up right on Sunday mornings. Oh, my furnace broke down, or this happened. And we can see that it's often very easy to be pulled from gathering together, very easy in our current cultural context we live in. There's a lot of things that pull. Now, when we look at this, we look at this passage, and here's the reason why, is because when we look at this passage, we're seeing this passage more from a transactional mindset. We see church as a transaction. It's something I go and do. It's something I have to get off my checklist for the week, or it's so ingrained to me that I just go do it anyways. And so it's not that big of a deal to miss because I can just make it up next week because it's a transaction that I have in my life. And the life of gathering together is not about transaction. Now, this verse is not saying, well, if you miss Sunday, God's not happy with you. That's not what it's saying. It's more so about the heartbeat and attitude we have. And so, yes, we might miss for illness. Maybe we're going to miss for, right, we're on vacation one week. That's not the point. The point is looking at our lives to say, where's our heart at? Is our heart aligned with His and what it looks like to gather with the body of believers that I'm a part of? So it's not about, did you sit in the seat this week, but it's about what does your heart look like? I came across a story this week of Henry Ward Beecher, and some people have different things to say about him, but he was known for a man of great faith, and this is a drawing of him. And one thing he would do is he would bring slaves out onto the platform, and he would try to raise money to set slaves free, is one of the things that he would do. But he was also known for his preaching. And so one day, he was set out to preach at this location, and he got sick, and he couldn't be there. And so his brother steps into the up front pulpit area, and as his brother steps in, he says, "I'm sorry, but Henry couldn't be here this morning. He's sick." And as he hit that K in his sick, people began to get up and leave. And he steps a little bit further out, and he says, "Well, did you come to hear him, or did you come to hear from the Lord and be together? You need to come back in here and sit down." But how often may we do that? We judge the Sunday morning experience based off, well, I like it, I don't like it. Well, you know what, Pastor? I can go hear a better sermon on YouTube. Well, guess what? You probably can. But that's not the point. The point is not about that you can hear something better. The point is how we are gathered together and how we are going through our series right now. There is no other church in America that I can guarantee you has our exact mission statement, and they don't have join on Sunday, join a group, join a team. Now, there are other churches that do up in and out, but we're doing this in community together because this is who we are as a local body of believers, And this is part of the big importance to this, is that we are a body of believers together. Now, when we look at this verse, Hebrews 10:25, we often look at the wrong part of it. We look at this idea of not neglect meeting. And so people will say, don't forsake meeting together, don't forsake it. Like, the forsake is usually the part that people stick out in this. Like, don't forsake it. To me, when we look at this, the word in this is the word together. The word together gives us the insight into this passage. Because this word in the Greek is something we would not catch in our English language. It does not matter what English language translation you have, it's not going to capture what this word actually means. This word in the Greek is the word episungoge. Probably pronounced it terribly. You who are grammar or phonetics, I'm awful. But this is what it means. It's the idea of a synagogue, assembly or congregation gathered in one place. So it gives us the word synagogue. So that's the first thing it talks us about, the end of it, okay, is the end of that. But on front of it, on the front of this word, is the word epi, right here. This is what's on the beginning of that. Now, when you see that word epi, what word comes to mind? Epic, right? Epic. So we use that word, and so I looked it up this week, and the word epic is meant to tell a story of a hero. So it's a narrative or a story that tells a story about someone who is a hero. And so I looked it up, just curious, to say what was the 4 greatest epic novels written. And this was the list that came up. The Odyssey was like the most epic novel ever written. And so these were stories that were epic, that were shared with the world around us. And so when we see this word together, it's epic. It means that we're meeting with Jesus in community. So the word epi here actually means over and above just a human gathering. Powerful here. The word together, it's powerful here. It's over and above just a human gathering. So if we all got in this room and Jesus doesn't show up, then what we've done means nothing. So it's a special gathering where God's people meet with Him. The church is God's primary way to meet with His people. Jesus says in the Gospels, I will build my church. He didn't say, I'll build your 401k. He didn't say, I'll build great worship services. He says the church, the body of believers. But this word here, together, is this idea. He says, let us not neglect our meetings together as some people do. Why? Don't miss out on this epic event where I'm going to meet with you together in community. Now, there's things in our life that get in the way of that. We can walk in the door with bitterness, or we can walk in the door with perspectives that we're like, that are maybe off, and we're going to miss maybe Jesus meeting with us. But ultimately, He's saying don't miss out on the epi, this amazing thing that's above just a human gathering. This here, right here, or maybe when you're even in a group setting, but the church is the only place where you can say this is above and beyond a human gathering. Because the focus is Christ crucified. But there's another piece to this that makes this interesting. This word, with the episungoge, is only used in one other place in the Bible. So at the end of this verse, it says this, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near. So there's a connection there that we need to see that's important. The only other place this is used is in 2 Thessalonians 2:1 that says this, now, dear brothers and sisters, let us clarify some things about the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and how we will be gathered to meet Him. This idea of gathered to meet Him is episungoge. It's the same word, which means on the day of Jesus' return, those who are believers in Christ will meet with Him. That is above and beyond a human gathering. That is epic. It's way above and beyond because we're meeting with Jesus when He comes back. So what the writer of Hebrews is saying is, you don't need to wait for Jesus to come back to meet with Him. You get to do it now. You get to meet with the risen Savior now in community. You have at least one time a week to do it. How amazing is that when we look at it from that perspective? The transformational side of that. The transformational side of that. That we get to be together in community and meet with Jesus himself, and he changes our lives. Now, so I think about, okay, where is Jesus? How does that work? But what I do know is I was reading this past week from Revelation 2:1. It says, "Write this letter to the church. Write this letter to the angel of the church of Ephesus. This is the message from the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who walks among the 7 gold lampstands," which the gold lampstands are churches. It says Jesus walks amongst these churches. It's often something we just can kind of throw out the window. We go in, transactionally do church, but do we realize Jesus is walking amongst our midst? And this is why in the book of Revelation, he said he's going to snuff out some of these lampstands because they weren't existing to be the church anymore. Right? And as we look at church, the idea of living up in and out need to all be vital parts. Again, we're not elevating just Sunday morning. We're talking, this is in context of living up in and out in our lives. So this is a superhuman gathering where we get to join to worship and experience the living God in community. That's what it's all about. It's experiencing Him in community. So how does that change now the way you approach worship? How does that change now the way you might greet someone knowing that we are meeting here with the living God? How does that change the way we approach it? Well, we need to always go from the idea of transactional to this is all about transformational. It's not about checking off the checklist that I did my duty of going to Sunday morning. It's not about going to church just to amass more knowledge in my head. It's about going to be in community to meet with the risen Christ. That's what it's about. This is the why of why we join on Sunday, because out of this flows the opportunity. Now, let me take this one step deeper. Because, again, words mean something. Words matter in something. So what does that word church mean? Well, the word church is the word in the Greek called ekklesia, which literally means the called out ones. So in this time and place that Jesus is saying, I'll build my church, they understand the word he's using. And the word he's using would be in that time and place where they would call people into a public place to go vote. So in our context, it'd be the idea of we have a day where we go vote and people go to a common meeting location to vote. And so he was saying you were called out from your house to that location to go vote. But he wasn't using it in the context of voting. He was more so calling it from the context of, in that culture, how you were called out on that day to go do something in community together. Because if you look at the idea of voting, right, if someone gets one vote, you think they'll win? What do you think? Probably not. You probably need more than one vote to win, but it's the one that has the greatest number of community members that vote for that person wins. And so he's saying here this idea of ekklesia, you are called out to be a part of a church body. And like I've always said, it is impossible to live the Christian life in isolation. It's impossible. Because you can't fulfill these words without doing so. The epi can only be done in community, and to actually be a part of the church, the ekklesia, you have to do that. So I go back to, now you can think internally. What keeps you from gathering with the church? You can just think about that for a moment. What keeps you from gathering with the church? I think the other question we need to wrestle with is, do we actually believe that this is a superhuman gathering? Do we believe that? Or do we need to wrestle with something in our own spirit to even get to that point? Is it superhuman? I know when we have Easter in a couple weeks, we're going to see some of the superhuman things that have taken place in someone's life. Above and beyond anything that a man could do, but only Jesus could do in someone's life. Do we believe that those things take place? I know recently I've heard many stories of people who've walked in here new on a Sunday morning, and a lot of times people say something like, I'm not sure what's happening, but something's different in my life, is the way they describe it. It's a great way to describe the epic gathering of God's people and community. He changes our lives, He changes our hearts. So how do these two things fit together? We talk about this idea of being a church in the beginning of our mission statement to glorify God, join on Sunday. How do they fit together? They fit together somehow. For me, this is the most practical way that it's worked out in my life. So, As you know, my two older kids are involved in basketball, sports, and there's a lot of weekend tournaments. And so, up front, before they even join a basketball team, I'll say to the coach, "Hey, coach, listen, here's the deal. They're going to play a couple Sundays, but they're not going to play every Sunday." Why is that? Well, church is important to us. I don't ever, sometimes they know what I'm doing, but that's not the reason. I don't ever bring the concept of pastor into the conversation, because that's not why we're doing it. And so I tell coaches, and so even my daughter's teams have a couple scheduled games on a lot of them on Sundays. I'll text the coach and be like, "Hey, I know it's not, you can't make everything for us, but just want to remind you we can't make it to every Sunday thing." So we've decided that it's a couple a year they can go to, but it's not every. Jay had a basketball game this morning in Mooresville that he did not go to, because this is one of the great ways that we can glorify God by showing the world around us that we live different. Now, I'm not saying this to be like we get it right or it's perfect, but I think it's something we all have to wrestle with. What are the markers in our life that we show people that our life is different? That we're not just going to live like the way the world does. And we get to have conversations. And I've even said to one of my kids' coaches, I said, if that means you need to cut my child to not play, then so be it. So be it then, if they can't make it to every single Sunday thing. Doesn't mean we're not committed. Sometimes they will come to church and then they'll go to a game in the afternoon. We allow that. There's some balance. But guess what we also do? I also talk to my kids and not say, well, you just got to be in church. It's not why. I explain to them, here's why. Here's why we're doing it. It's not just about you being there. It's not just about you walking in the door, but here's why we do this as well. So it's that ongoing conversation so they consider it and they think about it. But what markers do we have in our life, all of us, to say these are markers or symbols that I have in my life to live up to the Father and show God that I really believe what I say I do? What are these markers? And how does that bring in conversations to the people around you? What does that look like in your life? How is that lived out? Now, again, we can be here every Sunday morning, but we can also be doing it for the wrong reason. It's about the heart attitude. It's about the heart of transformation and meeting with Jesus' people in community because we know He shows up. And so as we began, could you say this when you look at Sunday morning? Again, we're not going to have checklists to be like, well, you said that last week, but it's, again, your heart. Where's your heart at? Where's your heart? Do you just walk in here to get out as quick as you can, or are you here to really meet with Jesus in community? Meet with other people. Stay for coffee. Hang out together. See how someone else is doing. The greatest thing that might happen on a Sunday morning is when I see someone praying for someone downstairs. Has nothing to do with a single word I said, but someone gets prayed because they shared a request. That's part of the superhuman gathering that couldn't happen if you stayed home. So all I'm asking this week is to be intentional with your life. Take a step back to say, Lord, how can I be intentional with putting these together? Glorify God and being a part of the church. Now, I get it. We can filter this up down into our group settings, right? So it's not just about what happens on Sunday morning. It's Tuesday morning and Tuesday evening and Sunday evenings and all these times the church is still gathering. It's still that's a superhuman gathering as well. But again, we just want to have symbols or markers to say how we keeping these rhythms in place in our life. So I encourage you this week, be intentional. Because as we're going to see over the next couple of weeks, when we get into April and May, we're going to see how when we do this, it impacts our life and community. But we're also going to see how it impacts our out to the world around us. Because Jesus says, when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, you'll be my effective witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world. That was not just for us to feel good about ourselves. That was for us to put feet on the ground, to reach people. So we're going to see how these all fit together, and they are all still rhythms in our lives. But this week, I encourage you to be intentional with glorify God. And how does that fit into joining on Sunday with the body of believers for a superhuman gathering?